What if I told you that everything you see isn't a real world, but just an illusion bubble, carefully designed by the media to shape what you believe? However, a single app accidentally burst that bubble, exposing decades of lies from the US media. It wasn't TikTok, Instagram, or any American platform, but an unknown Chinese app called RedNote. And it all started with one fateful decision by the US government. On January 19, 2025, a message appears on TikTok. Sorry, TikTok isn't available right now. Imagine waking up one morning to find your favorite app, the one you use every day, suddenly gone. That's exactly what happened to millions of Americans on that day. Content creators, small business owners, and influencers who had built their livelihoods around the platform were left in a state of panic. Where would they go? How would they rebuild their audiences and income streams? As news of the ban spread, tech giants like Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube were poised to welcome the displaced users. They had prepped their short-form video features, expecting a mass migration to their platforms. But while these mainstream apps anticipated an influx, an unlikely contender emerged. In a move that caught everyone off guard, Americans began downloading a Chinese app called RedNote. Within days, RedNote shot to the top of the App Store charts. The users who made this bold move proudly called themselves TikTok refugees. This label wasn't just a hashtag, it became a rallying cry for the users. It signaled their defiance against the ban and their willingness to venture into uncharted territory. But why RedNote? Why would Americans who had just lost access to one Chinese app immediately turn to another? The migration to RedNote represented a rebellion against the dominance of US tech giants. Users were sending a clear message. They wouldn't be caged into platforms controlled by familiar corporations. Instead, they chose to embrace an app that offered a fresh perspective and a global community. This huge migration had its challenges. The sudden surge of American users pushed the app to its limits, but the RedNote team quickly responded. In just 4 days, they created a translation feature, helping users connect across languages and bringing the East and West even closer together. As Americans settled into RedNote, they found themselves in a vibrant, diverse digital space. The app's interface was filled with lifestyle tips, cultural insights, and discussions that transcended previous barriers. The hashtag TikTok refugees started trending, filled with stories of migration and expressions of gratitude towards Chinese users for their welcoming attitude. The cultural exchange happening on RedNote was extraordinary. American users were engaging directly with Chinese counterparts, challenging long-held preconceptions about China and its people. This wasn't just a new social media experience. It was a window into a world that many Americans had only seen through the lens of Western media. As TikTok refugees dove into RedNote, they discovered an app that was a portal to an entirely different digital world. What exactly makes RedNote so unique, and why did it captivate millions of Americans almost overnight? RedNote, also known as Xiaohongshu in China, isn't your average social media platform. It's a vibrant fusion of multiple popular apps, Instagram's visual appeal, TikTok's addictive content, Pinterest's inspiration-driven community with e-commerce integration. This combination creates a digital ecosystem where lifestyle content, product reviews, and travel tips coexist in harmony. Users share detailed posts about products they've tried or places they visited. It's like having a personal shopper and travel agent rolled into one app. But here's where things get really interesting. RedNote operates as a single global platform, unlike TikTok, which separates international version and Chinese version, called Douyin. This means Americans found themselves in direct digital contact with Chinese users. No VPN required. It's as if a bridge suddenly appeared, connecting two vastly different online cultures. The impact of this digital melting pot was immediate and profound. American users were exposed to perspectives they'd never encountered before. They saw glimpses of daily life in China, engaged in discussions about culture and politics, and even picked up new recipes and lifestyle tips from their Chinese counterparts. RedNote's uniqueness extends to its algorithm. Instead of just showing you what's popular or what it thinks you want to see, it's designed to expose users to diverse perspectives. As you scroll, you're encountering new ideas, different viewpoints, and content that challenges your preconceptions. As Americans dove deeper into RedNote, they found themselves on an unexpected journey of discovery. The app became a window into a world many had never truly seen before. But as they peered through this digital window, they weren't prepared for the seismic shift in perspective that was about to rock their world. For years, Americans were told that China was a poor, controlled country with strict police and serious pollution. The media showed images of struggling people and a harsh government. But when the first posts appeared on RedNote, this image started to fall apart. Instead of scenes of oppression and poverty, Americans saw sleek cityscapes that rivaled or even surpassed the most modern US metropolises. The streets of Shanghai and Beijing bustled with life, filled with people going about their daily routines in ways that seemed surprisingly normal. A thriving middle class enjoyed life in ways that challenged every preconception. Users witnessed technological advancements that made parts of America seem outdated in comparison. As the gap between expectation and reality widened, a startling question began to form in the minds. If China wasn't the terrifying nightmare they'd been led to believe, what other truths about the world might be built on sand? The cultural exchange on RedNote wasn't just one-sided though. Chinese users, excited by the sudden influx of Americans, began sharing more about their daily lives. They posted about their frustrations with work, shared relatable memes, and discussed their hopes and dreams. It turns out, people on the other side of the world weren't so different after all. As Americans engaged with these posts, they found themselves drawn into conversations that shattered long-held stereotypes. They exchanged tips on parenting, swapped recipes, and sympathized over universal challenges like dealing with difficult bosses or navigating relationships. This exchange encourages a sense of community that go beyond national borders, highlighting the similarities between cultures that had long been portrayed as fundamentally at odds. However, it wasn't just the similarities that caught users off guard. The differences, when they appeared, often favored China in ways that left Americans stunned. A viral post comparing healthcare costs between the two countries became a flashpoint for heated discussions. Users expressed shock at the affordability of medical services in China, which often cost a fraction of what they would in the United States. But the revelations didn't stop there. American users were surprised to learn about the lack of homelessness and drug problems in many Chinese cities, a reality that contrasted sharply with their experiences back home. They read about how over 800 million people had been lifted out of poverty in China, a statistic that seemed almost unbelievable given the negative portrayals they were accustomed to seeing in US media. As these discoveries spread beyond RedNote, with users sharing their newfound insights with friends and family, the US government began to realize it was losing control of the narrative. The carefully constructed image of China as an enemy and a cautionary tale was being dismantled, post by post, conversation by conversation. But the cultural exchange happening on RedNote wasn't just changing perceptions of China, it was prompting Americans to reevaluate their own society. Users began questioning why they had been fed such a distorted view of the world. They started examining other aspects of American life with a more critical eye, wondering what else might not be as it seemed. As Americans questioned long-held beliefs, alarm bells started ringing in Washington. The carefully crafted narrative about China was unraveling faster than anyone could have predicted. RedNote had become a cultural bridge, exposing millions to unfiltered perspectives from across the globe. Behind closed doors, government officials scrambled to contain the situation. The idea of banning RedNote was floated, but quickly shot down. They feared another backlash, potentially worse than the one that followed the TikTok ban. The American public had already shown they wouldn't simply fall in line with government decisions about their social media choices. The solution, it turned out, was to bring back TikTok. By reinstating TikTok, they could redirect users back to a platform they could influence. But how? That's where Trump came in. Trump's team positioned him as the hero who fought to save TikTok. It was a strategic move aimed at gaining favor with young voters while simultaneously serving the government's interests. Within hours of Trump's grand announcement, TikTok was back in app stores across the country. The familiar icon reappeared on millions of phones, like an old friend returning from a long journey. Most users, drawn by nostalgia and the promise of reuniting with their old accounts, flocked back to TikTok. But beneath the surface of this apparent victory, a more complex reality was taking shape. While the government had succeeded in stemming the tide of cultural exchange, the damage was already done. Millions of Americans had caught a glimpse of a world beyond the narratives they'd been fed for years. A significant number of users decided to keep RedNote alongside TikTok. They had tasted something different, a platform that offered genuine cultural exchange and challenged their preconceptions. These users became bridges between the two worlds, continuing to share insights and experiences that didn't align with the official narrative. Critics argued that the whole TikTok ban saga was never really about national security. Instead, they claimed it was about protecting US tech monopolies from competition. The rise of RedNote had exposed the fragility of America's digital ecosystem and raised uncomfortable questions about censorship and narrative control. It became clear that the landscape had shifted irreversibly. The conversations that had started on RedNote continued to ripple through American society. Users experienced a level of freedom of expression not typically found on US platforms, and they weren't willing to give that up entirely. The government's attempt to put the genie back in the bottle had only partially succeeded. Yes, TikTok was back, and many users had returned, but the cultural exchange sparked by RedNote couldn't be undone. Americans had seen beyond the carefully constructed images of China and other nations. They had engaged in direct conversations with people they were told to fear or pity, and found common ground instead. Those once trusted sources of information suddenly seemed less reliable. People were fact-checking, cross-referencing, and questioning everything they'd been told about China and the world. This cultural shift was more than a passing fad. It was transforming how Americans viewed their place in the world. Universities reported a surge in enrollment for Mandarin language courses. Duolingo saw a staggering 216% increase in users signing up to learn Chinese. The RedNote experience had sparked a broader curiosity about Chinese culture and society. Turns out, when you strip away years of propaganda, people get hungry for the truth. The ripple effects extended to foreign policy, too. The old anti-China rhetoric that politicians had relied on for decades was losing its punch. It's hard to see a country as the evil empire when you've spent weeks chatting with its citizens about their favorite street food or binge-worthy TV shows. Healthcare, education, public transportation, issues long accepted as just the way things are, were now under careful inspection. Americans were asking uncomfortable questions. If China could provide affordable healthcare, why couldn't the richest country in the world?